Hey, Greyhounds fans, thank you for listening to the Hounds Huddle podcast on MoravianSports.com, the Greyhound Sports Network, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am LJ Smith, the Assistant Director of Athletic Communications here at Moravian University, and on this episode, part 1 of 2, I had the opportunity to sit down with Director of Men's and Women's Tennis, Mariana Freitas. On this part 1 episode, we'll talk about her time growing up in Portugal, playing for the Portugal national team representing her country, as well as her days as a student athlete at the Division II levels, and all the way coming up to the beginning of her time here at Moravian University. So let's get this episode underway and meet our guest, Director of Tennis, Mariana Freitas. And thank you for tuning in to the Hounds Huddle podcast, streaming live on MoravianSports.com, the Greyhound Sports Network, and wherever you listen to your podcast. I have the pleasure of being joined by the Director of Men's and Women's Tennis, Mariana Freitas, on this episode. Mariana, how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, first of all. I'm doing pretty well. Things have slowed down a little bit since the season ended, so feeling pretty good, just doing quick self-reflection on this past year, my first year as a head coach, and looking forward to start working towards next year.
That's incredible. You stated your first year as the director here. You've been here for quite some time, but you're finally getting to take over the program as your own. But before we get to the coaching side of things, we'll start all the way back from you as a child. And your story is unique to the university, considering you grew up in Portugal. So let's start with that. Was tennis the first sport you learned? How did that come about for you?
Yeah, so obviously, I grew up in Portugal. I'm originally from Portugal. I lived there until I was 17 years old. Tennis was really the only sport that I played at the competitive level. I think just our culture behind sports and our philosophy is very different over there, not only in Portugal, but throughout, Europe as a whole, that you don't really get to play 2 or 3 sports at the competitive level, all the way until high school. I mean, even at the college level, we see athletes, there are 2, 3 sport athletes, which is very, very impressive. But tennis was the only sport that I played, that I was serious about, that I played at a competitive level. Now, obviously, I've played soccer all my life because that is the number one sport in Europe, right? I mean, every neighborhood, every corner, every field, you see children playing around, with the soccer ball, kicking the soccer ball around. You go to the beach, you see people playing soccer. That is the universal sport there. Even newspaper, I mean, all the attention goes to soccer. You don't really hear about, I mean, that has changed a little, but you don't hear about other sports much. But yeah, tennis was number one sport that I play at the competitive level. My sisters and I, we were part of a club. So we started taking private and group lessons at a very early age. And then soccer was just the one sport that you played every evening with your friends, around in the neighborhood, even your street, we just found creative ways to play and make whatever, a road or, an empty field, a soccer field. And so, yeah, I would say tennis at a competitive level, and then soccer just every free time that we had. That was the other sport, the go-to sports.
So you had private training at a club with your siblings. What was that like? How was the competitive level between you and your siblings? Because I'm sure it could get pretty heated, and talent levels. Like, what was that like?
I mean, I actually, have a pretty good relationship with my 2 sisters. I'm the youngest of the family. My older sister, she actually started with tennis and then transitioned into basketball.
Okay.
So she wasn't, very involved in tennis after a while. Now, my middle sister, she's actually the professional tennis player out of the 2 of us. So, there's no hard feelings there. She is a much better player than I am. She, I think she dedicated more time to the sport. I think at one point I was more focused on, academics, and she kind of really wanted to invest in tennis, and my parents allow for that to happen. So she traveled throughout Europe a lot more than I did because, again, I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on the academic piece as well. So there's a 3-year difference between the two of us, so we were never really on the same like groups, the same age group. She was always, a year ahead, and just because she became just that talented, again, we were never in the same groups for our group lessons.
So you mentioned traveling. Were you a part of any type of you were part of a club, but did you play travel tennis? Did you compete in your country?
So we over there we don't have like the travel clubs like we have here. So again, it's just very very different kind of the culture there behind sports and the philosophy of it. I was actually on the national team. I got my first call at 10 years old, which I still remember because that was the first time that I got a cell phone when I was 10. Because I got my first call, and we were playing a tournament in Spain, in Madrid, Spain. So we were representing the national team. I believe it was 3 females and 3 male players, and we traveled with the national coach all the way to Spain. And obviously, that was a great experience. I mean, I don't know if we understood how serious it was to be, to get that first call to represent the country. I think we were just, happy to be surrounded with some of our, closest friends, and we were having, a great time exploring, a new country, and just hearing, this language that we've never heard before. And, the food and the culture was very similar, so there wasn't much of a change there. Again, we were happy to be surrounded by, some of our closest friends, and still obviously playing the sport that we love. But I don't quite know if we understood how serious it was that we were representing, our country.
At such a young age, nonetheless. So 10 years old was when you got your first call. How long did that run span?
Until I was 16. I had, so from 10 years old until all the way until I was 16, I had a medical condition then. I had an issue with one of my kidneys. So I was actually out for an entire year after that. Unfortunately, I couldn't play sports. But while I was healthy, I was lucky to have traveled around Europe and representing the national team, and even obviously within our country as well. We had a lot of international tournaments in Portugal, so we represented, our nation in obviously our home country as well. But after that, after 6 years, unfortunately, I had to I had to stop playing sports as a whole. Even just the kicking the ball around in the neighborhood, that wasn't, that couldn't happen until I had surgery and obviously got healthier and stronger. So yeah, I was out of the national team and just out of competitive sports at 16.
What did that do mentally for you? Because you just go from being a 10-year-old to representing your country for this span of time to then having to just completely halt everything. How did that take a toll on you? Because it's hard to go from like nonstop to
Right.
just screeching halt.
I think, it was very, very difficult because, I grew up just always being outdoors. I mean, I skateboard, I play soccer, I play rugby at one point. Again, nothing ever at the competitive level. Tennis was really the only thing that we were serious about. But we were always outdoors. Middle school, high school. We live right next to the beach, so we are always swimming or playing soccer, playing volleyball, rugby, and so all of a sudden you were not even allowed to go for a run. All you can do is basically go for a walk, but that's not, especially when you're competitive and you're an athlete, you don't really consider that a good workout. So that was very very difficult. But I think what it did for me, it allowed me to just become a better student. Because again, with all the tournaments that I went through, during, the academic year, I missed a lot of classes. I missed a lot of, assignments. I missed a lot of exam days where I was just traveling around Europe, which is not a bad thing,
Oh, not
right?
at all. That sounds
But
amazing. It sounds
but then
amazing.
you have a lot of catch up to do as well. And, thankfully, our parents were very helpful, and, our professors as well. But they really just helped me, become a better student and just focus on school. And another thing is, at 16, that's really when you decide, at least for us in high school, kind of which direction you want to go. If you want to go into, sciences or languages or, social studies or history. And so it allowed me to figure that out, which field I wanted to go into. And I think just the education piece, that last year, of high school, that's so important, because at the time I made that assumption that I was going to, university in Portugal. This whole thing of coming to the U.S. and being a student athlete here, that wasn't in the picture. That wasn't even, we've never had a conversation about that. So I knew that I had to become a better student, a stronger student, if I wanted to get into any school in Portugal, because I was set that I was going into marine biology. So I knew I had to have some good grades. And obviously, my grades were probably just average, since, again, I missed so many school days. And I think it allowed me to become, a better student. But it's still, it's a different lifestyle than the one you are used to.
So you get to high school, you take that year off. You're talking about looking at going to a university in Portugal. When did that first conversation happen about coming to the States for schooling and being a student athlete?
Honestly, it was a very last minute thing. I mean, very, very last minute, because, um, you know, it was probably spring of my senior year of high school that I was kind of allowed back to do like light activity. And so I started to, obviously, with tennis again right away, but just not serious, 2, 3 times a week. And then, there was a big tournament in one of the islands. Portugal has like two islands, to kind of like the west of the country. And my parents, they allowed me, or they asked me, do you have any interest in playing those tournaments, because they're international tournaments that I played many times before. And I said, I don't even know if I'm in good shape, right? I mean, obviously, I've been out for so long, and I was taking things slow, and but I wanted to take on that challenge and see where I was. And so I did train a little harder. Just, the weeks before the tournament, I played the tournament, and that's really when I had someone come up to me and say, hey, I think you could get a full ride to play, in the U.S. And this was actually, a Portuguese coach that worked with some universities here. She actually worked for an organization in Spain that recruited athletes all throughout Europe to, again, not only for tennis, but for many other sports, to become student athletes, in the U.S. and have this experience where you are allowed to, succeed on the court, in the classroom. And then when she told me that, I mean, that was kind of the first time that it became, a possibility of me, coming to the U.S. And yeah.
So it took one person
Right.
to just put that seed in your head of like, this could be a possibility. So this coach talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like having that conversation with your family about like, this could be a possibility? How do we approach that? Because that could seem like a daunting task of like, hey,
Right.
this is an opportunity. How do we approach it?
I think for my parents, it wasn't. I think we were shocked, because I was definitely not at the level that I was like previous years. You know what I mean? I definitely didn't feel like I was as talented or worthy of getting, a scholarship to play in a different country. However, we already had one person here, my sister, that had already gone through that experience of being a student athlete. She was also recruited. And again, she was older than me. So she was actually here in the US when that happened. So it wasn't completely like new. My parents had already gone through that experience. They brought her over, to the U.S. and she already had completed that or she actually started in the spring, so she was about 2 or 3 months in here in her first experience, her first semester in the U.S. So we knew a little bit about the experience that she was having. I think for me, there was still some concern about my health and whether or not I was going to be able to commit to play at a high level for 4 years. And just, this was March, April. And it seemed like very late, as you know,
Yeah.
because most people, by, I don't know, November, December, they
yeah.
have already, all the applications are in, and for the most part, they have already committed to, or verbally committed to a school. And so that was just very late in the process. And even, it's not an easy process then to select a school here, because you have to obviously create a video of yourself playing and the different skills that you have, a little introduction speech about what do you want to study, why do you want to have this opportunity of coming to the US and being a student athlete. So it just felt like it was very, very rushed. But at the same time, I was very open-minded and I was ready for a new challenge. So, when I sat down and talked to my parents, actually the way that we agree on was that I'm gonna do a gap year. So I'm gonna do, be a student athlete in a school anywhere in the U.S. for 1 year, and then I'm gonna come back home and then start university in Portugal. And so that seemed like a fair agreement between my parents and I, because I always had that idea of doing a gap year in Africa, actually, because both of my parents are from Africa. So I always wanted to do, finish high school, do 1 year there, and then come back and then actually start university. And so this was a little bit of a change. It wasn't the same gap year that I had envisioned, but it still seemed like a great opportunity. And just being told that we could potentially get a full ride, especially after being out for an entire year. It didn't seem real, but it was just too good of an opportunity to say no to.
So you get this opportunity, and I'll reference this here. You attend a Division II school, University of West Alabama, and had, I'd say, some success there. That's speaking very like a blanket statement. What was the experience like coming to the States and playing at a Division II institution?
That was probably, I would say, the best experience and the best decision that I've made for myself. It wasn't easy, obviously. That first year, it was very, very difficult because, again, still dealing with some health issues. I was only 17 when when I actually first came to the States. But that was my first time in this country. So, my parents and I, we had to make that decision to commit to a school that we didn't know anything about, right? I mean, we went on the website and that was basically it. And it was really just the kind of the relationship that I created with a coach over the phone. And that's how I landed at the University of West Alabama. But it was a great experience. Again, first year, just a big, big adjustment. New culture, new country, new language, just everything, every single lifestyle habit, everything was different than what I was used to. But I think the good thing is being young, you're open-minded and you're ready for a new challenge and you're ready for an adventure. And I think that makes things easier. And then we also had so many international students at the school. We had, a tennis team full of international students. And again, we're all on the same boat. So it makes that transition a little easier because it's not just you by yourself. You have other people that are exactly on the same boat. They're young, they're new to the country. We're learning a new language, just learning, everything about the culture. And yeah, so I mean, first year, I would say big adjustment. Then from then on, it was a great experience.
What can you do with Business Phone from Penn Teledata?
Make a conference call from the coffee shop.
Or connect from the back 9.
With unlimited phone services, 24-hour support, and mobile synergy, our cloud-based technology makes it easy to do business from anywhere. And we do mean anywhere.
No more being stuck in the office.
Which is great for everyone, I think.
Add cloud-based business phone service from Penn Teledata.
St. Luke's Orthopedic Care. Extraordinary care in motion.
Historic Hotel Bethlehem is perfect for any stay. The finely appointed rooms and suites are complemented by excellent dining choices featuring Chef Michael Adams, the tap room for drinks and casual fare, or an upscale dining experience with a view at 1741 on the terrace. For business meetings, visit our Executive Conference Center, stop by our women's boutique for a selection of fashion and jewelry, or grab a cone at our Hotel B ice cream parlor. Historic Hotel Bethlehem is where our history will make the memory of your stay last a lifetime.
Are you looking to get your hands on Moravian University Greyhounds gear? Head over to moraviansports.com and click the link Sideline Store under the tab Fan Zone to find our Moravian apparel store. Each month, there is a promotion that offers a discount to all things Greyhounds, from hats, hoodies, shirts, and more. Head to the Moravian Athletics Sideline Store today, powered by BSN Sports. Was the game different coming from Portugal and playing internationally to the States? Was there anything you had to get used to on the courts, style of play, any aspects like that that could have been different to you as well? Obviously, culture shock, all these different like entities in front of you that you're not accustomed to. But then again, you're still playing a sport which is very international. Did you notice any nuances or changes within the game itself?
I would say, I grew up playing in clay courts my entire life, right? We had very few tournaments in hard courts, which is completely different than what we see here, right? As you know, I mean, everywhere you go, people play in hard courts here, mostly, I guess, down south in Florida, just because of older population play on the hard true courts. But for the most part, every, obviously, university, we played in hard court. And that there is an adjustment because, the points go a little faster, and it's also tougher on your body, right? The clay courts, you tend to focus more on, top spin. The points are going to go a little longer than the hard courts, just because of, the ball traveling faster in hard courts. So that was, a little bit of an adjustment, but not, nothing that we couldn't handle, because I know other international students were on the same boat where, they have played mostly on on clay courts and grass courts and not so much on hard courts. But I would say just the training was very different. I think everything behind like the sports culture in this country, that it's very different, just more serious. All the workouts that we have, waking up 5 a.m, every day. I mean, I love it. I love how competitive it was. I love how hard the training was. I think another major difference, I would say, is that, as you know, tennis is very individual. Yes. Very, very individual. So you grew up playing on your own. It was always just you on the court, no one else, right? Yeah. So you're almost competing, obviously, against your mind, and then obviously against your opponent as well. But I played very little very few doubles tournaments while I was in Portugal. And even representing the national team, it was mostly singles tournaments. So that was the biggest difference because it was not about you as an individual. We are part of a team now. And I think that's very hard for, a young person to adapt because, it's not all about you. I mean, this is about having a team first mentality now, because if I lose my match, we still have the ability to win as a team.
Correct.
If I win my match, we could still lose as a team.
There's that obstacle there that it's a completely different mindset.
Very, very different mindset, because it's not, me, myself, and I out there competing. It's a team, and we're part of a team, and everyone matters. And again, every point counts the same, whether you're playing a number one. So whether you're playing top of the lineup or bottom of the lineup, every point counts, and every point counts the same, right? I mean, we're not saying, top of the lineup, your point counts as three, bottom, your point only counts as one. No, I mean, every point matters. So that team atmosphere was very, very different. But again, I mean, it's a great thing. It's a great thing, especially when you're new to the country, because all of a sudden now you gain all of those friendships. But it is quite the shift in mindset that it's not all about you. It's about it's bigger than you. It's a whole team atmosphere, and just the fact that you're also representing the university, which I feel like I already kind of knew that, because representing, the national team,
Correct.
You're also obviously, that's a big task, and you're asked to, behave and, and conduct yourself in a certain way. So I didn't have a problem in that area, but it was more the fact that, it was 6, 7 of us and not just me out there competing on my own.
So going off of that, you have all that pressure of me, myself, and I. You're competing for yourself. But is there a pressure that you put on yourself knowing that you're representing a team now? So let's say you're playing your individual point, and it's coming down to you at like third singles trying to win a match point. It's for you, but you also have the pressure of the team as well. Did that translate because you've already been representing your country, or did you feel it a little different because of the individual versus team aspect?
I think I felt the pressure a lot more
Really?
here, playing as for a team here in the U.S. Because even when I was on a national team, it was still me, myself, and I. It still came down, to my match and my performance, and it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't like those points counted. Like, obviously, it was great that you were selected to represent the national team, but it was still very, very individual. It was just that, wow, I'm here with the national team. I mean, this is a huge accomplishment. But this here, being part of a team here, it was very different, and I think there was a lot more pressure. And that's probably why in singles I struggled a little bit more, because I was just so hard on myself, because I didn't want to disappoint my teammates. Because I knew, I mean, I was probably okay with if it was just me, myself, and I, and disappointing myself. I mean, it happens and you learn from it. But I think it was just, there was added pressure because I didn't want to disappoint, my team and my coaches, because, I always had a great relationship with my coaches during my time here in the U.S. And so, yeah, definitely added pressure. And just, it's so tough when you're out there on your own, on the court. I think doubles is a lot easier because you have that partner, you have your teammate picking you up. But in singles, it's almost like it's me, myself, and I, because you're on your own on the court, except you're playing for, for an entire team, an entire program, and a university as well. So definitely more pressure there.
So you're at University of West Alabama for 2 years, and then you have the opportunity, you transfer to a Division I program in Tarleton State University in Texas. What was the transition like? How did you kind of take what you've learned from University of West Alabama and translate that to Tarleton State?
I think it was definitely an easier transition compared to my first year in the U.S., right? Because I was definitely used to, the people, the language, and the culture. So that I think I had already was already past that. So it was definitely an easier transition. And I think I grew so much as a person and as a player during my 2 years in Alabama that when I got to Tarleton in Texas, I was very confident, in my ability on the court to perform on the court and also in the classroom as well. But I know I had a big challenge ahead of me because, we had a great team in Alabama, but Tarleton was a much stronger team, and the expectations were a lot higher, and so there was definitely more pressure. We were, when I first started at Tarleton, we were, I believe, 34 or 36 in the nation, and then after 2 years, we were in the top 15. We were 14 when I graduated. I believe we were 14 in the nation, and obviously we're top 5 in the region, but so as you can imagine, I mean, the training was very different, a lot harder. It was more competitive and definitely more serious. But again, I really enjoy just, just working hard and doing everything it takes to reach your full potential as an individual and as a team. But I don't know if I would have been as strong of a player as I was in Texas if I hadn't had those 2 years in Alabama first.
So you're at Tarleton. You're a top program in the country at a Division I institution. Personal accolades. Not that you're here to brag about yourself, but it's always nice to kind of reflect back on your successes. What was it like to have success at a Division I program? Did that click that it was a Division I program after representing a country? Because you're getting acknowledgement and accolades. So it's obviously something to celebrate.
So yeah, I mean, we obviously had great success, and we were definitely, grateful for, the team that we had and the coaches that we had. So just kind of going back. So Tarleton, at the time when I played, we were actually a Division II school.
Wow, okay.
So we were a Division II school, Alabama also Division II school, and we were just obviously much stronger because we are ranked in the region and in the nation. They made that transition, I want to say 4 years ago. That they became, a Division I school. They definitely had the facilities for that, and it's awesome for them, for the school. I mean, I love the school. I love the tennis program there. So it's great to see them transitioning to a Division I institution. And I would love to go back one day and watch them compete. But, still, the level was very, very high. And I mean, I was, again, I don't want to, I think that the biggest change for me coming to the U.S. is that I'm more about the team now than I am about, the individual. But just a little bit about obviously what we accomplished. The rankings, I mean, I think they speak for themselves because obviously going, down like 10, 15 spots, becoming top 15 in the nation. I mean, I think that's huge. But, my partner and I, she was also from Spain. We were ranked in the region and in the nation in doubles. I think I grew to love doubles. Maybe because of having that help on the court, and it's not just you out there on your own. And then I was also ranked in singles, but definitely my best rankings were in doubles.
So you're about to finish your playing career. What was the next step? What did you want to do? Because I know you spoke about going back home, but you didn't take that gap year. You stayed and you competed at such a high level. You finish your career as a student athlete. What was the next step for you?
So that was interesting, right? Because obviously that gap year never really happened. It ended up being a little longer than just the 1 year. But again, it's just I had such a great and positive experience that's why I wanted to finish it, and I wanted to complete a degree. There were still talks about going back to Portugal after I finished my bachelor's. And I knew in my head my goal was to pursue a master's degree, whether in Portugal or here in the U.S. And again, I think I was just at the right place in Tarleton, because what happened was the GA was going to graduate and finish her master's degree and obviously move on with her life. So my coach actually, fall of senior year, he asked me if I wanted to become his GA, which, I mean, that was still early. It was still very early in the year. And, you know, all I knew was that I want to pursue a master's degree. That's what I want to do. And again, it was kind of like going back 4 years, that a great opportunity. You know, someone comes to you with just an unbelievable, you know, opportunity, and it's hard to say no to it. And, you know, I love the institution. I love the area where I was in Texas, and it just felt right. And so it was almost, I mean, I gave it a couple weeks to think about it. But then, you know, at the time I was, you know, doing, I was getting a bachelor's in biology, and they did have, you know, a master's in biology as well. So it just felt right. And, you know, and I never even thought about at the time to do anything in coaching, because obviously, you know, I was, you know, earning degrees in sciences and, you know, biologies and marine biology. So, you know, I've never even thought about like coaching at all. But it was mostly, okay, you know, I get to pursue, you know, another degree while still, you know, spending time on the court, learning, you know, all about coaching, and I still get to do it with some of my best friends. Correct. Right? Because, I mean, obviously some of them continue on the team, and some of the people that I actually lived with, and now I was going to be their GA.
So you're the GA there for 2 years. You get a degree. Was that the plan? How did that? What transpired after you accepted the GA position?
Yeah, so I was there for about 2.5, 3 years. Okay. So it took me a little longer to get the master's degree. It definitely wasn't an easy degree, but it was a great experience. It was, at the beginning, that first year as a GA, it was also not the easiest transition, because again, I was living, you know, I was in the same apartment together with some of my teammates, and obviously that just wasn't a possibility anymore. If I became the GA, you know, I couldn't be. It would just be very weird. So, you know, I had to move out and, you know, find an apartment on my own. And it was difficult in the beginning, because now, you know, you have to think things a little bit more seriously. You know, you're on the coaching side of things. But because I never even anticipate being there, you know, becoming a coach, I really didn't know how to deal with it. So I had a lot of conversations with, you know, my head coach about that, kind of like, how do you set boundaries, you know, with your past teammates, now that you're, you know, their, you know, graduate assistant. But, you know, it was definitely, you know, a very, very good experience, just kind of getting started in the coaching field, and then obviously earning, you know, a master's degree in biology as well.
So after Tarleton, what was next? Did the conversation about going back home, did you fall in love with coaching? Like what happened as a result after your GA?
I definitely fell in love with coaching more than expected, more than I was expecting. I think the conversations about going back home, that was always a possibility. That was always in the back of my mind, right? Yeah. So I would always have that conversation, you know, with my parents. I think when I finished at Tarleton, you know, when I finished my master's degree, there was only one thing that I knew at the time, that I didn't want to go into the science field. I didn't want to go into biology or do anything with that degree, which is unfortunate, because obviously I spent a good amount of time undergrad and at the graduate level. I think some of us figure things out, you know, later than others, and that's what happened. That's what happened to me. But at least I knew that for sure. I don't want to go into, you know, the science field. However, now I had this new passion about coaching, and what I realized was that I didn't want to be, you know, away from a tennis court. I wanted to be on the court as much as possible. So it was interesting, because I had a couple options. You know, my mom actually owns a tennis club in Portugal.
Wow. Okay.
So I had, you know, there was definitely that conversation of, hey, you come back home, you could, you know, become, you know, get certified and become, you know, a pro here at the club, which that would be awesome, right? After spending, you know, 6-7 years here in this country, going back home and you know, work for my mom and at her club and be surrounded by family again. So that was definitely a strong possibility. But, you know, when you graduate from an institution here in the U.S., you're given 1 year to kind of like work here
Okay.
and gain experience, right? And because, I mean, going back to what we talked in the beginning about the culture around sports being so different here and how we invest, so much, I would say, time and money, to grow, sports and to make sure that we have some of the best athletes in this country. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I just don't see how that could happen in Portugal because, like I said, we're so much into like one sport.
Correct.
We invest so much in soccer, and it's so unfortunate that when we have, so many talented athletes in other areas, whether it's tennis or, whatever other sports, volleyball, and we don't even hear about it.
Yeah.
You don't hear on TV, you don't hear on newspaper, because if it's not soccer, and that has changed. That has changed a little the past 2 or 3 years, but I just didn't see how I could go back and make a career, out of sports over there. But that aspect of being surrounded by family and obviously working at, within a family business, that was there for me. And, I knew that was a strong possibility, but having, given that 1 year that you could work here and gain experience in this country, I definitely wanted to take advantage of that 1 year. It just felt like, going back to that one gap year, it was always, we'll do one more year, one more year. and we'll see how that 1 year goes. And then we'll make another decision.
Yeah. So what led you to Bethlehem? Because it's a trip from going down south up to the northeast. So what led to that conversation and ultimately landing in Bethlehem?
So, I knew that science was out of the picture, so I knew the next step was to find a job as in the tennis field, in athletics, in the tennis world, and obviously being a GA, it made sense to look for a job, as an assistant coach. And then my other goal was to explore this area, the northeast part of the U.S., right? Because I was in Alabama and then I was in Texas, and I spent, a good amount of time in Texas, doing undergrad and then at the grad level. So I knew I wanted to explore this option. So I started, obviously, applying for jobs here. And, at the time, this was, 2014. I was talking with about 4 coaches,
Okay.
2 in New York, 1 in Maine, and then obviously 1 in Pennsylvania. And again, I knew very little about, some of the areas here and some of the schools here. I know one of the schools was Colby College in Maine, a couple schools in New York, and then obviously Moravian. And I didn't know anything. It was almost like going back to 2007 when I'm like being introduced to all of these universities, yet I knew nothing about them and the areas where they were located. So it came down once again to the relationship that I developed with the head coach. Which at the time, former director of tennis, Art Smith, he was the one that hired me. And, I definitely built a strong relationship with him just in those, 2 weeks that we were kind of going back and forth, exchanging emails and talking on the phone. And then, when he offered me the job. And the other jobs were very similar. Everything was, assistant coach base, similar duties, similar responsibilities, all with the possibility of also taking grad classes, which I was actually, even though I had just graduated with a master's degree, I was very interested in doing that because I knew that I went out of, the science field. So I was very interested in doing something at, business management or even sports management. But yeah, I mean, I made a strong connection with him. And then, he offered me the job, and I took it after a couple days, and then it was time to pack my things and that long road trip.
I can imagine.
Long road trip from Texas all the way to Pennsylvania.
So this seems like a good spot to take a quick break and hear
Okay.
a word from our sponsors. But it's just amazing to hear the story of how you were such a great athlete in Portugal to having to take literally a gap year is what I'm going to call it due to injury, and then getting back on the court, getting recognized, and then this whole story unravel. So thank you for sharing that with us. We'll take a quick break and come back and talk about your Moravian journey. I had such a great time talking with Mariana Freitas, the director of men's and women's tennis. Wasn't that so amazing to hear the story of her growing up in Portugal, representing the national team, and making her way to the United States, playing at the Division II level for college tennis? My goodness, I'm so happy I had the opportunity to learn and have her tell that story to everyone. Just incredible. So much that we need to break it up into 2 segments. Next segment, part 2, coming next Thursday on the Greyhound Sports Network, MoravianSports.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But make sure you follow the tennis programs on social media at Moravian Tennis on Instagram and Twitter, and at Moravian University Tennis on Facebook. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and follow the Moravian University Athletics accounts as well. That's all I have for you on this episode of the Hounds Huddle Podcast. Until next time, I'm LJ Smith, signing off.